Good evening, everybody. My name is Krish Kandaya, and I wish you a warm welcome to our Hospitality Pledge launch event. We're so excited that you've joined us. And please tell us where you are in the world. Use the chat. I know we've already got people here from Switzerland, from the West Midlands, from Oxford, from Oxfordshire, from York. Keep adding those names into the chat so we can know where you are. But you are very, very welcome. Welcome and hospitality are the defining features of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. If you're someone who is from a Christian background or from a church background tonight, and I know there are people that are coming from other backgrounds too, you need to know that welcoming the stranger is one of the defining features of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. Jesus once said in Matthew 25, which is the most scary parable you've ever read, that he was a stranger, and that we are to welcome him in. In fact, if we don't welcome him in, the chances are that we're not actually part of God's family at all. So there's some pretty heavy stuff about how important welcome is. I don't know about you, but I've been in situations when I've needed a welcome. I remember leaving home and going to university and turning up and looking hungry at the end of a church service, and some very kind older Christians welcomed me and made me feel very at home in their house. They invited me for lunch, which was lovely. And I didn't know it was etiquette to leave after lunch. I was so hungry because I was so rubbish at being a cook at university that I kind of stuck around for tea too. I realized that there was a way to get 2 meals out of this experience. So I've been on the receiving end of hospitality, and it's made a huge difference to me kind of moving on in my life. But imagine that you're someone who is far away from home. You fled war or terror or famine, and you've had to leave because otherwise you're going to be caught up in all of that, and you need somewhere safe for you or maybe even your family to live. And many people have come to that really terrible circumstance. And most people that move around the world end up moving within the country they're in. It's called being internally displaced. But others have to leave the country that they've called home and travel away from that. That's when you become an asylum seeker or a refugee. And that's the group of people we're talking about tonight. Other forms of hospitality are really important. You might know that I'm involved working around that whole area of adoption and fostering, because we want to show hospitality to vulnerable children. That really matters. Others of us will know about the work we're doing welcoming people from Hong Kong who have come here as migrants to set up a new life, and it's important to welcome them. But tonight our focus is on asylum seekers and refugees, and how we play our part to use our voice and to use our homes to be able to help them. That's our vision tonight, and we're so delighted that you could join us. We're going to start this evening with prayer. If prayer is not something you do regularly, that's okay. Just maybe use this moment as a time of reflection. But we're really excited that Pastor Shola Irukwu, who is one of the pastors at Jesus House, a large church in central London, is going to lead us in a moment of prayer right now. Thank you, Pastor Shola.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Shola Irukwu, and I'm on the leadership team at Jesus House, London. Thank you for joining us on the Hospitality Pledge this evening. I'm so excited at what we can all achieve together through this great initiative. I would like to start off the evening with an opening prayer and would like to ask you to kindly join me. So, Heavenly Father, we thank you for our gathering today to launch the Hospitality Pledge. We pray that it will achieve its purpose of being a voice for refugees and provide a warm welcome for them in the United Kingdom. We bring every one of these precious people before you, Lord. We pray for their families, especially their children. We pray for their needs, their well-being, their dreams and aspirations. And we pray that you will make a home for them in the United Kingdom. We pray that you will give us as a nation a heart of compassion for these, your children, who have become refugees as a result of wars, persecution because of their faith and beliefs, and humanitarian disasters. We pray that you will give those of us that have committed to the Hospitality Pledge strength to lend our voices, our energy, our time, our gifts and talents, our material resources, and graces to the efforts to make a difference in their lives. We know that the refugees are precious to you, Lord, and we ask by your grace that the hospitality pledge will be a tool in your hand to show the love of Christ in a practical way. We thank you for the many other organizations that have a similar burden and are serving your kingdom in a similar way. And we trust that you will cause all our work to bear fruit and that it will bring glory to your name in Jesus' precious name. Amen. Thank you, and do enjoy the evening.
Wonderful, Pastor Shola. It's wonderful to have Jesus House's support in this brand new initiative, and it is brand new. We're only a few weeks old, but we wanted to involve you right at the beginning as we begin to work out how we as churches respond to asylum seekers and refugees right now. You might be asking, why now? There's been a refugee crisis around the world for many years. Many of us will remember that awful, heart-wrenching picture of Alan Kurdi, that 3-year-old boy washed up on Bodrum Beach. That picture changed the world. Literally, the conversation around refugees and asylum was changed by that picture, because we all realized that little boy was an innocent caught up in a global catastrophe. And we felt actually that could have been one of our children. That could have been one of our loved ones who would needlessly perish in that way. So why are we talking about this now? Well, our government is just working out a new plan for immigration, and it's caused quite a lot of controversy. Many people are up in arms, upset about it in lots of ways, because it's changing in a very radical way our asylum and immigration system in a way that's been unprecedented and is likely to change the way that things go forward for the next 10 years. I'm one inspired by people like Daniel and Esther and Joseph in the Bible, that need to find a way to work with the government to try and find some solutions to some of the problems that government face, but also we as Christians are called to help with. And I think some of the ideas behind the new plan for immigration are just not going to work. It means that many people are going to be caught in a very difficult set of circumstances. And we, the church, need to step up and play our part to speak up for vulnerable asylum seekers and refugees, but also find a practical way we can demonstrate that hospitality. So that's why we're doing it now, because this new plan for immigration is in its design phase. And now is the moment for us to influence it before it becomes law and before it changes our immigration system for the next 10 years. So we're trying to be constructive, engaging, but also to speak up that we might see a more compassionate asylum and refugee system. But this sort of stuff, this issue really matters to the church, and not just some churches, but all churches. This is a core part of what it means to be a Christian, as we said at the beginning. And it's great to have Jesus House as part of this movement. It's great we're going to be hearing from Archbishop Angelos, who leads the Coptic Church in the UK. But recently I caught up with Nicky Gumbel, who is the vicar at Holy Trinity Brompton, a fantastic church in the centre of London, famous for the Alpha course. And I asked Nicky, why do you personally care so much about refugees?
I'm passionate about it because my father was a refugee in a way. My father was a secular Jew, and when the Nazis came to power in Germany, he was disbarred. He was a lawyer in Germany, and he was stopped from practicing. He was disbarred, and he came to this country, and thankfully he was accepted here. He was interned in the first, because he was German, he was interned in the first week of the war, but then I think they discovered that he was Jewish, and he joined the British Army as a private in 1942 and was a full colonel by the end of the war. And then he loved this country. He had an absolute passionate love for England, because they had received him. And I'm so grateful that this country did, because if he'd been thrown out of this country, I would not exist, because he would have been in a concentration camp in Germany. A lot of the Gumbels died in concentration camps. Emil Gumbel managed to escape with the help of Albert Einstein, who was his good friend. The Gumbel distribution, I think it's called, still taught in mathematics today in universities. He was thrown out of his university in Germany. I mean, in the providence of God, because he would have if he hadn't been thrown out, he would have been in a concentration camp. This is a book written about Emil Gumbel, and Einstein said in his speech, "The occasion of our meeting is the case of Professor Gumbel. Inspired by an uncompromising sense of justice, Professor Gumbel publicized the details about a number of political crimes that have gone unavenged. He did so with devoted industry, high courage, exemplary fairness, performing through his books a signal service to our community. Yet this is the man whom the student body and a good many faculty members of this university are doing their best to expel. Men like him are indispensable if we're ever to build a sound political framework for our society." Well, they did expel him, and he went as a refugee to France. And then when Hitler invaded France, Einstein again helped him, got in a car, and he kept a day ahead. And eventually Einstein got him to America as a refugee in America. And that's where he came up with the Gumbel distribution. So anyway, so lots of boring. I don't want to bore you all with stories about so this book is called Emil Gumbel, Weimar German pacifist and professor. And it's interesting because, you know, a lot is being made now of people like Bonhoeffer, who were the Christians who fought against the Nazis. But I think this book was written in an attempt to sort of find some of the Jewish people who had really resisted the Nazis and had suffered the consequences. You know, look at Alf Dubs. I mean, he's another example of someone who was rescued through Nicholas Winton. What's Sir Nicholas Winton? I think he came on the Kinder transport, and look at the contribution he's made to this country. So you know, I think when the history books are written, hopefully that there are asylum seekers right now and refugees who kind people will, like they did with our family, help to rescue.
It's fantastic. I know you love the Bible, and each day many people around the country are listening to you explain bits of the Bible to them. There's a passage in Hebrews I think we both love that talks about why offering hospitality to refugees might be important, not just to you and me, but to God himself. What's your take on it?
The writer of Hebrews says, keep on loving one another as brothers and sisters. And love, of course, is the key to life. That's what we're created for, to love God, to experience God's love, to love God, and to love one another as the writer says, brothers and sisters. And he goes on, do not forget to show hospitality to strangers. For it, by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. Well, I guess those who showed hospitality to Alf Dubs were showing hospitality to an angel without knowing it. And all those people who came over with the Kinder transport. Hospitality is, well, it's part of Alfred's hospitality. It's like come for a meal, but even more, having people in your home is hospitality, and it's an act of love. That's how the writer of Hebrews puts it. This is a way to love people, and who knows who you may be loving. It might be an angel,
Fantastic.
It might be someone who turns out to be an Alf Dubs, or people who are really going to change the world.
It's brilliant, Nikki. Thank you so much. We know how busy you are and love what you're doing at HTB to help neighbours and to help people discover more about Jesus through the Alpha course. But thank you for being passionate about refugees and asylum seekers too. It means a lot to us.
Oh, thanks, Chris, for what you're doing. Amazing as always. Home for Good was amazing, and this is amazing. And we've all got to get Hong Kong ready because they are. There's a lot of angels are going to be coming into this country.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nikki. And we'll be hearing a little bit more about Hong Kong Ready a little bit later in our evening. Well, it's fantastic to be joined by Archbishop Angelos, the head of the Coptic Church in London. Also fantastic to have Lauren Scott here, the Executive Director of Refugees at Home, and fantastic to have Emily Holden, Joint CEO of Welcome Churches. Welcome to all of you. Fantastic. Thanks for joining us. If you do want to ask a question to our panelists, you can put questions into the chat bar as we go throughout the evening. Or if you want to agree vigorously with what someone said, please use the chat for that as well. But let me ask a first question to Lauren. Lauren, what can you tell us about the current situation for refugees and asylum seekers in the UK right now?
Hi, Krish. Well, I think it goes back to what you were saying at the beginning about, Alan Kurdi a few years ago, those shocking images and that collective support everyone showed towards asylum seekers trying to reach the UK. That unfortunately dissipated quite a bit, and we find that a lot of our guests are facing challenges not only in terms of claiming asylum and maybe the accommodation they're put into or the services that they can't access, but actually that real anti-immigration rhetoric that's been building, and just the impact that can have on individuals, but on communities as well. So a really important part of hosting, and certainly what we've seen at Refugees at Home, is the importance of getting our guests integrated into their communities and society, whether it's the guest we had last week out doing a litter picking with his host, or the guests that we have who are doing vaccination centres across the country at the moment. Unfortunately, like I say, a lot of resources aren't available because of coronavirus, so our guests are looking for that distraction to help them through what essentially is years of limbo while they claim asylum, while they wait to hear about their right to stay, and just the effect that can have on somebody, not only physically and mentally, but spiritually as well, is huge. So it's not a nice place to be in your life.
Thank you, Lauren. And you're here representing Refugees at Home, but also the wider network of charities that are hosting people who would otherwise be street homeless, even though they're claiming and seeking asylum here. That network's called NACOM, No Accommodation Network, and it's fantastic to have you with us. We'll be hearing more from you throughout the evening. Archbishop Angelos, why is this something that Christians should care about?
Thanks, Krish. I think, as we heard from you and as we heard from Nikki, and as we all know as Christians, our Lord said that even he, when he came to serve and not be served. He came to lay down his life. There is no greater love than for one to lay down his or her life. It's about servanthood. It's about feeling the pain of others, and so therefore doing something about it. The whole nature of the act of incarnation, when Christ came to earth, it was because he felt our pain and wanted to alleviate that pain. And he said to his disciples that freely they had received, they must freely give. We've received so much. We've received so much daily. Love, the fact that we can have this call, the fact that we can worship freely, the fact that we have roofs over our heads and warm places to be. We take that for granted. And sometimes we're even a little bit picky about it. We don't understand the incredible gift we have. But as Christians, we've got to understand the magnitude of what we've received. And so the magnitude of what we can give. And, there's one particular Old Testament passage that really touches me about this. And it comes from the book of Leviticus, chapter 19. And if a stranger dwells among you in your land, you shall not mistreat him, which of course goes without saying. But then it goes further to say, the stranger who dwells among you shall be to you as one born among you, and you shall love him as yourself. So it's not just about giving gifts or giving generosity. It's about whatever I want done for me, I want done for the other person. And then he goes on to say, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. We've all been estranged. We've all been in need, and we've got to see that in others.
Thank you, Your Eminence. That's so helpful to set it in a biblical context. I guess our focus for this first section of the evening is to be thinking about how we can use our voices, moved by the plight of people who have come to the UK and are finding life very difficult, recognizing that there are changes afoot. My friend Lynn Burnhope, who I think is in Buckinghamshire, is asking about, has this new legislation already happened? Priti Patel has threatened that the new legislation that Priti Patel has threatened, has it already happened? Because it seems as though things have been toughening up already. I wonder, before we get into maybe from Emily in a moment about how we might use our voice, what might we do right now? Let's be clear about the context. Lauren, do you want to comment in on that? Where are we at with this new plan for immigration?
Yeah, absolutely. The new plans are certainly coming, but what we have seen building over the last years and months is that growing hostility, and certainly attempts to make it harder to claim asylum and harder for the people having to go through that process. So these new immigration laws are certainly, if they go through, going to be much more severe. But I think it would be disingenuous to suggest that it's been an easy process up until now.
Yeah, that's helpful. It is currently still in its consultation phase. That's one of the reasons we started our hospitality pledge, actually, is because the government is open to conversation. There was a large scale online consultation. We've organised a few roundtables, getting some key stakeholders in the room with the Home Office, again, with a constructive mindset. How can we help? How can we make sure this is as humane and compassionate as possible? So there is opportunity still to influence, and that's why we wanted this to get started immediately before the legislation became law. But Emily, can you think of some good examples of churches or individuals that have already started to use their voice constructively in this conversation?
Yes, I know there's been lots of people who have already wanted to respond to the new plan for immigration. Lots of churches who'll be on the call tonight will be thinking we've already responded. We've written to our MP. We wrote it in the consultation questionnaire that was sent out. We've done all of that, and those things are really helpful. I think one of the key things about the new plan for immigration is the government think it's what we all want. They think it's what the voters want. And so that's what's really key in the hospitality pledge, is that we say this isn't what we want. And we tell our MPs, and we show that actually we want to be a hospitable nation. We want to be welcoming, and we're going to talk the talk, but actually put it into action. This isn't just about using our voices and only our voices, but also being very practical in that as well. The other way that you can use your voice is when you know somebody personally, and that makes such a difference. So we'd really encourage everyone tonight to be really thinking practically, how can I know somebody by name who's seeking asylum in the UK or who's sought refuge here? How can I include them in my daily life? And as you get to know somebody, your life will be changed, and you'll be able to speak up for them and use your voice even more coherently as a result of that.
That's really helpful. Alistair Cussing was asking, the UK government did engage with Syrian refugees 2 or 3 years ago in a positive way, which was good. This intervention focused only on Syrian Muslim refugees at the time. How can we ensure the government properly includes Christian, Jewish and other minority groups? Alistair, hold that thought, because in the next section, we're going to look at particularly the issue of persecuted minority groups. That's exactly where we're going. But thank you for raising it right now. How about from Sue? She's asking, what advice can you give to a refugee who has got his right to remain, but has been told to leave his Serco accommodation and go to a homeless shelter as he now has nowhere to live? Lauren, I think we're in your space here, and someone else was asking a little bit more about what Refugees at Home does. Do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Refugees at Home, we are here to provide temporary hosting for people who are claiming asylum and for people who have got the refugee status. So we are part of NACOM. We are just one hosting group, but we are one of the few who host people who have the refugee status. So to answer Sue, if he's been given his notice to leave his accommodation, he should have been given 28 days notice. What I would suggest is to get him referred to a scheme like Refugees at Home. We would take him through that process and hopefully find him somewhere temporary, which would give him the chance to look for employment, look for his own accommodation. That's what hosting schemes do. it is all about move on, but it's about having that safe space. And that leads back to what I think it was Ruth was asking about our vision. Our vision is that for every asylum seeker, every refugee who needs a safe space to stay, we will provide that while they try and rebuild their lives. That's what we want to do.
That's brilliant, Lauren. And it's great. Also in the chat, I can see Caris refugees are here, Restore Birmingham, churches supporting refugees in Birmingham. So there are lots of different agencies all working together in this area, actually. And as we go through the evening, the next section, we're going to be looking specifically at those persecuted because of their religion and belief. And then we're going to look at practical ways that you and I can be involved in hosting, or at least signposting people to the hosting projects that are there. So hold on to that. I wonder, Archbishop, some would say that engaging with government is going to get our hands dirty. That they might not like this government, they might be not liking politics in general, and so the idea that Christians would be working with a government to try and find positive solutions might be seen as anathema to some. What's your take as a Christian leader?
Thanks, Krish. I think there's a difference between government and politics. And I don't think we should get involved in politics, because politics is where you talk about interests and sides. Whereas this is our government. This government represents us, each and every one of us. And so not only do we have a responsibility, but we have a right to engage with government and to make sure that the decisions that are taken are those that we would see important. And I do think, in this age, there's been a lot of generalization. And I do think politicians and policymakers and lots of other people like, religious leaders and anyone else get generalized into a very negative context. You and I know we've dealt with lots of people in government, in the Home Office, in organizations like Emily and Lauren, lots of people. There are lots of people with such a heart. And what I've always said is, we can't do this alone as religious leaders. We can't do it alone as NGOs or advocates. Policymakers can't do it alone. Unless we have a collaborative, holistic approach, this is not going to work. So I don't think we get corrupted. In actual fact, I think, even when you look at the Christian model of our Lord Jesus Christ, he spoke to decision makers. He elevated the voice of the persecuted to others. He was a chief advocate. And I think that's what we need to do. And just, if I can come back to one thing Lauren said earlier about hostility, I think the reason there is a lot of hostility is because of othering. As long as we think of others as others, then we will find ourselves quite comfortable in making this an us and them situation. But when you see someone who's suffering, as a Christian, I see the image and likeness of God in that person, whatever his or her denomination, faith or no faith at all. And I see the sanctity of life that God has created in this person. And so I'm protecting that for the value of that person in God's eyes.
That's really helpful, Archbishop. And I love the idea that we're engaging with government, not just participating in party politics. And it's important to us, we're not taking sides. We're not pro the Conservative Party or against the Conservative Party. We're not Labour or Lib Dem or Green. We're trying to transcend that and to speak up on behalf of vulnerable people. It's exciting, actually, as throughout the evening, you're going to be hearing from a Labour peer, Lord Dubbs, later, but also a former Conservative MP as well. So we're trying to transcend that party politics and to speak up on behalf of vulnerable people. It's great to have Catherine Gladwell, who leads a fantastic organisation working with refugees. Her question, maybe Emily, you want to help with this one. Hi, Krish. One of the things that our supporters have found regarding the new plan for immigration is so complex to engage with as the bill goes through Parliament in the coming weeks. It would be great if churches could receive key points through Welcome Churches or this network to feed back to MPs. And finally, if it is on the cards, we would love to share our key messages around the impact on children and young people. And that's Catherine, who's the chief exec at Refugee Education, a fantastic charity. Do you want to speak to that, Emily?
Yeah, so I think, as you've seen, Krish, over the last few months, we've been working quite closely together on this. And what we've been doing is bringing mainly key Christian organisations and denominations together to respond to this, and trying to feed into that together and think through what are the key things we want to say together to then go forward. So we're going to be looking more at how we do that with more organisations, hopefully with Refugee Education and Caris, the others that are on the call tonight as well, that we can bring those together to identify those really key points that there are that we all agree on, and we can go forward, because this is a movement that we're all in it together, and I've not got all the answers and you've not got all the answers.
No.
And there's such expertise in all the people who are watching tonight that will be able to move forward with that.
That's right. And we see this as the very beginning of a long journey, and we're hoping to collect more friends to come and help us along the way. So Catherine, please get in touch. You've got our details, and the others of you that represent organisations, let us know your interest, because we're in the process of organising more roundtables with the Home Office so that we can work constructively within the bounds. I don't know about you. I think this is what the government really wants to do. I don't know whether, lots of us would like to start again and start with a blank sheet of paper and redesign it. I think that's optimistic. I think they are set on their trajectory. My feeling is we can get in alongside it and make it as good as it possibly could be, and find some areas of common ground. But if you want to join a movement like that, we'd love to hear from you if you represent an organisation tonight. Just before we move on to the second area, Emily, Welcome Churches has really got behind this hospitality pledge. Just say a little bit more about what Welcome Churches does and why you're keen to be part of the Welcome Pledge initiative.
Yeah, well, Welcome Churches, we exist to see churches welcome refugees and asylum seekers across the UK, and no matter where you are, there's something that you can do to do that in your community, whether that's welcoming people who are already arrived or welcoming new people who are going to arrive in your community as well. Hospitality is so key, and something that Bishop Angelos said really reminded me of something that happened a few years ago. So we were welcoming a family to my church when I lived in Nottingham. I've just moved to Manchester, but and some of the families from the church wanted to invite them round for a family tea, so we did that. And there was one asylum seeking family, one new refugee family who were facing homelessness, and then quite a few British families that were fairly affluent. And the conversation moved on that this family was facing homelessness, and the asylum seeking mum, she said, they must come and live with me. They need to come and stay with me. I've got space. And she didn't have space. She had 2 children in a 2-bedroom terrace house. She didn't have space for a family of 4. And nobody else at that party, who probably all had a spare room, said anything about welcoming, saying that they can come and stay with them. So we've got so much to learn from people who are seeking refuge, and we are challenged and grown and stretched as we welcome those who are seeking refuge. And there's just so much that we grow in as we do that, and it really challenges us. So I hope that challenges you as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Archbishop, Lauren, Emily, for joining us. We'll be hearing more from you throughout the evening, but thank you for participating in this little panel right now. Now, we're going to move on. We've thought a little bit about why Christians should be involved, how we might use our voices, why we need to get clued up right now with this new plan for immigration coming through. But an area where there does seem to be opportunity in the new plan for immigration is that there is a lot of interest in helping people who are being persecuted because of their religion or their beliefs. That's a real open door, it seems, of opportunity for us to do some really good work collectively there. And one person who's really led the charge on this is the Bishop of Truro, Philip Mount-Stephen, and he's going to share a little bit about the work he's already done in forming the Foreign Office.
Friends, welcome to Cornwall. It's a great pleasure to speak to you today. My name is Philip Mount-Stephen and I am Bishop of Truro. You may be aware that a couple of years ago I authored a report on the way that the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, as it then was, had responded to the global issue of Christian persecution. if I'm honest with you, I was shocked by the scale, the scope, and the severity of the problem in today's world. There are many reasons why it has become such a big and such a very significant problem. In some places, we see authoritarian governments who brook no opposition. We see militant nationalism that is very suspicious of minorities. We see religious fundamentalism that really objects in the strongest terms, and often violent terms, to people of another faith practicing their religion. And I would say that out of maybe a relatively clear sky, just maybe 20 years ago, this problem has just crept up on us to become one of the most serious challenges of our time. Now, it's really important to say that my recommendations to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office were clearly framed in terms of freedom of religion or belief for everybody. And that includes, indeed, the freedom not to believe. So yes, as a Christian leader, I believe that I have a responsibility to my Christian sisters and brothers the world over. But equally, as a Christian, I have a responsibility to people of all faiths and of none. Jesus set no limits on who we should call our neighbour. So therefore, I felt clearly that my duty was to encourage the UK government to be as broad as it could be in its protection of people's freedom of religion or belief the world over, recognising that people of other faiths other than the Christian faith are persecuted for their faith. We think of the Rohingya, we think of the Uyghurs, we think of Hindu minorities in Pakistan, to take just a few examples. All the world over today, people are suffering and having their right to freedom of religion or belief seriously compromised. Now, I was delighted when Her Majesty's government, not just the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, but the whole of the government, accepted the recommendations of my review in full. They have become part of government policy. They were reiterated in the Conservative Party manifesto, the 2019 election, and a commitment to implement them in full was reiterated again in the recent Global Britain paper. So this is on the government's agenda in a way that it hasn't been, I believe, for a long time. And I'm delighted by that. And there are implications for the government beyond the issue of how the Foreign Office acts, but beyond the issue of how the UK acts internationally. And this issue can certainly impinge upon immigration policy in this country. It can impinge upon it, and I believe that it should. It would be a logical extension of the recommendations of my review for the UK to offer asylum, offer refuge to refugees who are persecuted on account of their religion or belief. It's perfectly possible that the UK can do that. I believe that the UK should do that. We should live up to our commitment to freedom of religion or belief, and open our doors to those whose lives are threatened and whose livelihoods are seriously compromised simply because of what it is that they believe. So I think this initiative is very timely. This word hospitality, I think, is absolutely vital for us. It's time for the UK to show real hospitality to those whose lives and livelihoods are threatened in this way. So I fully support this initiative, and I really do encourage you to do the same. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Bishop Philip. Such a helpful presentation there. As you've seen, we are interested in helping all asylum seekers, all those that we think the UK should be caring for, those that have arrived here already. Oh, sorry. Haha, little glitch. Hopefully that's the only glitch for the evening. We want to help all asylum seekers that are here already. We're worried about their accommodation. We're worried about how they're being treated. But we're also interested in this opportune moment of joining the dots between Bishop Philip Mount Stephen's important work with the Foreign Office, which has been accepted by this government. All the recommendations have been accepted, and we're trying to join the dots between that work around freedom of religion and belief and the new plan for immigration. And as Christians, we are particularly literate when it comes to faith and how to help those two pieces of work join together. So that's why we're coming and adding this second component, not just speaking up for asylum seekers, but also offering help and assistance to those that are persecuted because of their religion or belief. And in that light, it's really wonderful to have Rahima Mahmoud here. Rahima, welcome. It's lovely to see you. You are part of the Uyghur people group, and many people watching this will have read something in the news about some of these terrible atrocities, internment camps in China, the satellite imagery that's shown maybe 1 million people who are imprisoned. It would seem because of their religion, because of their identity. Could you share a little bit about what's going on with the Uyghur people in China right now?
Thank you, Krish, for having me. And well, it is unbelievable what is happening in this 21st century. I would like just to share it from my own personal story. I came here in 2000, and after the Roja massacre happened in my hometown in 1997, and then I never able to go back. But I was able to speak to my sisters and brothers back home. And then suddenly in 2016, from October, people started to remove me from WeChat groups, and my phone calls left unanswered. No one would answer my phone call, all at once. And about 2 months later, in January 2017, then I called my eldest brother repeatedly because I heard a lot of terrible news, what was happening. Things were changing and people are being arrested, taken away, disappeared. And then finally, when my brother answered my phone call, and I said, why no one is answering my phone call? And he said they did the right thing. And that actually, in a way, he told me that if they did answer your call, that, you know, something bad would have happened to them. Therefore, they did the right thing and said, leave us in God's hands, and we leave you in God's hands too. And his voice was shaking. And he is a father figure since my father died in early 90s. In the past, if I didn't call him once a week, he would become very upset, and because I'm a cancer survivor, so he's always worried about my health. And suddenly when people don't answer your call, your loved one, such a close family, and it is something terrible is happening. That is just a proof. And then around April, the reports just become very clear that the mass internment started. So police would just raid the houses or summon people to visit the police station, and then place a black hood over their head and taken away. And family didn't know what happened. Family were not informed. There is no any legal process. Many professors, many teachers, doctors, first they came to the religious people. So the first target were the families who are more religious, and then intellectuals, and so young Uyghurs, anyone even below 40 years old, also in a group called the important group. So the group that they watch very closely, and they are the suspected group. So in 2018, August, the very first time the UN subcommittee on racial discrimination and openly acknowledged that up to 1 million Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities are locked up in prison camps. China completely denied this, but after confronted with the satellite images and the credible reports by the independent researchers and also many testimonies from people living abroad who learned that their family been missing. And they said that we actually share this Islamic terrorist problems, that we are the centers are for de-extremification, re-education. So at the moment, that was in 2018. Now 4 years passed. 3 years passed since 2018, and we know China never stopped arresting people. So every day we hear that there are people being taken away. So we believe up to 3 million Uyghurs and other Kazakh and other Turkic Muslim minorities taken into the so-called re-education camps. In fact, that there's no difference from the concentration camps. And over 1 million Uyghur children separated from their own families. Most of these children had their parents already taken to camps. They're not allowed to be looked after by extended families. And over 500,000, maybe up to 1 million, are taken for forced labor, slave labor, in cotton fields and factories around China. And from the handful of survivors managed to live. Most of them had a foreign connection, either their spouse were foreign national, and therefore they were allowed to live after 1 year or 1.5 years being interned inside these camps. And the horror is just unimaginable about torture, systematic rape, sterilization, and so this is what we are, facing at the moment for Uyghurs. And we learned that the over 1 million Chinese cadres are deployed to live with Uyghur families at least 5 days a week. And most of these families, the men already taken away, so the sexual harassment and rape is, we call it state-sponsored rape. Is happening. They monitor whether you eat pork or not, whether you drink alcohol or not, whether you have any religious books hidden in the house. So basically, no one is free. Whether people who are in these camps, and we learned many reports that people have to denounce their language, their culture, their own culture, and most importantly, denounce God. Wow. So we heard from several camp survivors, and they said exactly the same thing. So after a lesson, before they leave the so-called classes, all chained and shackled, and they have to say, the teacher will ask them, do you believe in God? And if they say yes, they're taken to the called dark room to be tortured. So it's unbelievable what is happening to my people at the moment. And whether you are inside the Uyghur region, the East Turkestan, we call it, or living, outside like myself in this free country, we are suffering. I don't feel free. And you feel that kind of guilt even, having this freedom.
Thank you, Rahima, for sharing so personally and so powerfully. And I know it's not easy to talk about these things, but thank you for sharing. Many people will not really understand the extent of what's going on, and you've really helped people. Let me invite Archbishop Angelos and David Burrows to join us now. Archbishop, we didn't rehearse this in any way, but after hearing something like that, I feel like we must pray. It's such a terrible atrocity that's going on right now. Would you lead us in a short prayer, Archbishop?
Thank you, Krish. Please feel free to join us, and if not, just spend some time in quiet reflection. Lord, we place all your children before you. We pray particularly for Rahima, her family, her people, all those who suffer in every way. That the brokenness of our humanity be healed by your grace and by your love, and that we may project that love into the world and be your light in darkness, wherever it may be. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Archbishop.
Thank you.
So we've heard a particularly horrifying example of people being oppressed because of their religion and belief. Sadly, this isn't the only place in the world where terrible things are happening to people because of their beliefs. But David, this new plan for immigration seems to offer some hope that the UK might get involved in helping. Why is the government open to this area at the moment?
Yes, certainly so. The plan, at least a chapter of that plan, is positive in terms of saying very much as a headline that the government wants to protect those fleeing persecution. Plainly, we have to recognise that we're only making a contribution to the global needs of those fleeing persecution. It's a global phenomenon, and Christian persecution and persecution of others for their faith belief is a global phenomenon. And sadly, in these times we're in, the government are committed to it because it's right to be committed to it, because it's a matter of human dignity and it's good for everyone. It's good for all society. And sadly, as we know and as we heard already, tragically, when one disrespects that fundamental right, it goes alongside other disrespects to other human rights, not least gender and other areas. And so it makes sense for the government to, in their global efforts of wanting to project good values across the globe, that it cares about this issue, and it's certainly central to their strategy. The Prime Minister said himself that in the floor of the House that it's good for society to protect this, but it's also the reason why it also matters to the government is that, as you heard from Bishop Truro, it's a manifesto commitment. They promised, and anyone who's contacting their members of Parliament is because they promised to do so, to commit to fulfil those recommendations, which mean that it includes carrying on with the good words that are in the new immigration plan, that they will indeed offer a broader resettlement offer for those fleeing persecution. And they've called out the fact that Christians are being persecuted and other minorities, and that they will provide a more flexible, broader offer for those who are suffering persecution in areas of conflict. We need to see that reality on the ground. They want to work with faith groups, community groups, providing sponsorship. And you and I, Chris, have been there before when the offers have gone out, and it matters that there's a reality on the ground. And this is what this is all about, to provide that and to help the government through this. They've made good warm words in that new immigration plan. Whilst there's other issues people may disagree with, focus on this area where there's a real door that's opened to provide a broader, better offer for those fleeing persecution for the sake of their faith or belief. So let's open that door wider for the sake of those most vulnerable.
That's really helpful, David. And that's one of the reasons we're moving forward with the hospitality pledge right now, because that door is open. And if we can help construct a system or a process so that persecuted Christians and other minority groups like the Uyghurs, like Yazidis, like other groups around the world that are in imminent danger could be resettled. Not all. We're not claiming that with a single solution, we'll just play our part. There's a really time-focused, time-sensitive moment here for us to grab. And David, actually, just explain a little bit about your role, because that's a really exciting new position that's opened up for your boss, Fiona.
That's right, Fiona Bruce, Member of Parliament, Christian Member of Parliament, who's been passionate about freedom of religion or belief for all. And she is the Prime Minister's Special Envoy for freedom of religion or belief. And that envoy has been placed for 2 or so years now. And it's her role to implement what we heard from Bishop Truro, to make sure that that really is fully implemented, and to make sure that when we talk about persecution and are concerned about the issues of those fleeing to give them safe sanctuary and shelter and protection, and that extends across the board. So not only in the Foreign Office helping our diplomats and others and refugee camps do the job there, but also as we track back into those that are needing resettlement and we want to resettle, to ensure that when we come back onto our shores, quite rightly so, that there's a consistent concern for those who've been persecuted for the sake of their faith and belief. And it's that consistency that Fiona and I'm having to advise and support her is wanting to ensure is across government, which is also part of that manifesto commitment we believe. And so this particular example is like a litmus test to the government saying, fantastic that you're serious about what's going on in areas of conflict. Now let's make sure there's a consistency in that same concern for the same people who have vulnerable and their concerns for the dignity all the way through, and all the way through to the point of not just the shelter, but also in the support, their vulnerabilities about mental health and into transition to employment. Let's make sure that offer keeps with them. We're in it for the long term.
Some might call this a kairos moment. There's incredible need, and there's also this promise. And if we can help bridge these two things together, almost join the circuit, if you like, something really exciting can happen. Archbishop Angelos, as you heard Rahima speaking there, as a Christian, maybe help us understand, why should we care about other people's freedom of religions, not just Christians?
Thanks, Krish. So there are a variety of reasons. First and foremost, because, as I said earlier, we're supposed to do unto others what we would want done unto us. And we want others treated the way we want to be treated. So my own church has been a persecuted church for 2,000 years, and even in contemporary history. And yet I could never sit comfortably thinking, I'm going to advocate for Coptic Christians, but I don't care about Uyghur Muslims. It wouldn't sit right, it wouldn't be right. So from a Christian conviction, it's wrong. Even when we look statistically, as David just mentioned, when we look at countries where there are violations on freedom of religion or belief, there are other violations as well. So it's a cycle. Quite often, religious and faith and belief communities are used as soft targets. And it's a way to test the water, because then you get to the next step and then the next step after that. So from, I think, a perspective of what is right and social consciousness and social conscience, we must work for the good of our societies. And then finally, I think strategically, it's not wrong to think strategically as a Christian. It's actually right for us to use our God-given gifts, to use our networks, to use the people we know for good, and to come together and journey together. Because, again, as I said earlier, this challenge is bigger than any individual, any church, any religious organization, even any state actor. This is something that has to be addressed across the board. And finally, I think, in terms of the sound bites we hear most recently, we hear a lot about refugees and forget that the issue is about refuge, seeking refuge. These are people who are seeking their own safety because they are fleeing from a tangible, real risk. These are not people leaving one suburb for a leafier suburb or somewhere where there's better schooling. They are leaving war-torn, near anarchic states. I remember being on the Greek-Macedonian border very early on and seeing people coming off what they themselves called, because as they called them death boats. They were speaking Arabic and I could speak to them directly. They said these were death boats, and they crossed over with the equivalent of a plastic shopping bag. And that's all they owned in the world. What would make people leave their heritage, their communities, their culture, all of that, to go into an unknown territory.
That's right.
Life-threatening.
Thank you, Archbishop. Really helpful. Rahima, you can maybe see from the chat, so many people are very moved by what you shared. Perhaps you could help us to know what people should be praying or what people should be doing to be able to support Uyghur people right now.
Thank you. I think the least that people can do is prayer, share prayers. Because for Uyghurs, for them, even praying is a crime. And for me, growing up in a very religious background, my father was an imam. And what you talked about, hospitality, is just so natural. He used to bring strangers in the house very often. It's so natural for the Muslim faith that, open your door to and your heart to strangers, offer them the best you have. So for Uyghurs at the moment, the strangers, we became strangers in our own homeland and taken away every basic rights. And the saddest thing is we cannot even escape because of this the high-tech surveillance control, the checkpoints every 200, 500 meters. People cannot move, even going into the house, that you are monitored all the time. But there are people who are living in third countries who don't feel safe. For those other people that actually a country like UK can help, for them to reach safety before they return to China. Because if they are returned to China, either face death or just torture, and is unimaginable painful experience that we know. Many refugees sent back from Thailand, from Egypt, and from other countries disappeared. We don't know what happened to them. So therefore, I think it is important that people, we should have at least this compassion, regardless whether they are Uyghur or Chinese refugees or Hong Kongers or other people. In the end, we are people. We are one. We are same human beings. And only then I think then we can feel free if we can have that kind of compassion. So it is important people should show that compassion and help, support. And also Uyghurs living in exile, even in this country, a lot of them need your compassion, because a lot of Uyghurs now suffering a mental health problem because we're cut off from our loved ones for over 4 years and not being able to know what happened. Also, most of them who learned at least one or two, or sometimes the whole family members gone, disappeared. And so, these people need your, even just to offer kind words, or, writing articles to support, condemning China, and all that can help. And also join like a campaign, Stop Uyghur Genocide. Those can give a really sort of moral support for the Uyghurs. Yeah.
Thank you, Rahima. And you've challenged us both to pray, which we promised to do, but also think of some practical ways we might be able to support Uyghurs that are already here. Thank you, David. Going to be hearing from you in a little bit. And thank you, Archbishop. Going to hear from you again soon. But as you can see, this hospitality pledge has 3 components. For the first, let's speak up for asylum seekers that are here in the UK, that they are treated fairly and compassionately, Let's work constructively with this new plan for immigration to make it as humane as possible. Part two, we want to step up for persecuted people around the world who are persecuted because of their religion or belief. As Christians, we have a specific empathy and understanding of that. And I think that's something we can really offer to the government and to people that are being persecuted in that way. And the third area that we're going to transition to in a moment is to think about how we use our homes in order to be able to help asylum seekers. Nicky Gumbel mentioned him already. I think Nicky Gumbel called Lord Dubs an angel, which I'd love to tell him about, actually. That was lovely. Lord Dubs has been a tireless campaigner for the rights of refugees and asylum seekers, partly because of his own story. I had the chance to catch up with him recently, and he shared with me some of the reasons he's involved, but what keeps him going in the pursuit of justice for refugees and asylum seekers. Lord Dubs, thank you so much for making time to speak to us. Some people on this call know your story. Would you be able to just help those that might not know a little bit of your story hear why you are so passionate about helping refugees and asylum seekers?
Well, first of all, can I just say that the cause of refugees and asylum seekers, of course, should not depend upon the personal experiences of the advocate. Because the cause is so important. However, having said that, because of my background, I'm bound to be more emotionally involved with it. I can't help it. So my background is that I came on a kinder transport from Prague at the age of 6 in July 1939 and came to Britain. At that time, Britain took 10,000 kinder transport children between 1938 and 39 from Germany, Austria, and Czechoslovakia. And Britain offered great hospitality. There were some arguments, but on the whole, it was fairly seamless, and the whole thing was stopped by the outbreak of the war in September 1939. So that was really my story. I remember the Germans occupying Prague. My father was Jewish, so he had to leave quickly, and we had to tear a picture of the Czech president out of our school books and so on. My mother was refused permission to leave, so she got me on a kinder transport. And it was a 48-hour journey, hard wooden seats, but the age of 6, you don't notice that. I spoke 2 languages, Czech and German. I had about 3 words of English, so I had to learn English when I got here. Like so many refugees, I had to learn English on arrival. It's easier when you're 6 than when you're 16. It's easier when you're 16 than when you're 26. So, the school playground is a tough place and you learn fast.
It's an amazing story, and many people in Britain really celebrate that story as something absolutely fantastic that our nation's done. There's a big statue, isn't there, outside Liverpool Street Station in bronze. And so this is part of our heritage, something we're really proud of, but it seems like that the attitude towards refugees and asylum isn't what it could be or what it used to be.
Attitudes to refugees, migrants, and so on have gone up and down a bit. They've gone through various phases. I think that the problem was partly exacerbated by Brexit, simply because it polarized communities, and it made people who were here feel unwelcome. And I think that worked whether they came from Europe or whether they came from further afield. So that was rather sad. And we've got to work back on that one, because I don't believe we can win arguments unless we get public opinion on our side. I mean, that is one of the key lessons that I've learned. If public opinion is supportive, then the government is almost obliged to listen to public opinion. So I've always tried to say that anything on behalf of refugees should be done across party. It shouldn't be the property of one political party. And I've constantly said to myself, we've got to reach out to wider communities, faith groups. Schools are wonderful. Kids at school understand. They get it very quickly, and trade unions, businesses, and so on. All of these are groups where we need to let our voice be heard on behalf of refugees. After all, the number of refugees who get to Britain is tiny compared to Germany. It's actually even tinier compared to Turkey, Jordan, and Lebanon. I mean, Turkey took 3 to 4 million refugees, and Jordan and Lebanon 1 million each. So when people say to me, why don't the Muslim countries do a bit more? I say, well, I reckon if Turkey take 3, 4 million, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5 to 6 million people, that's quite a large number compared to the few thousand we're talking about here.
You seem to be a tireless campaigner. What keeps you going?
Well, I tell you what, it's people like you. It's people who work with refugees who won't let me stop. Don't forget, I get the publicity, but there are a lot of people working at this. You know that. You are. There are a lot of other organisations, people like Safe Passage and so on. They're all working for refugees, and so it's a collective effort. The fact that I get the publicity is just one of those things, one of those quirks of the media, and I use it because I told my friends it's helpful to be able to speak out and get the publicity. But also, you know, if one believes in something, one isn't going to stop, and the other people believe in it won't let me stop. So together we're going to push this further.
Brilliant. Well, we're very grateful for your time today, but we're very grateful for what you do and have been doing for many years. We're cheering you on from behind, and thank you again for your time tonight.
Well, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you for what you're doing. It's all part of public opinion. It's all part of a positive mood, which will help to improve the values of our country. So thank you for what you're doing.
Brilliant. What a pleasure to have Lord Dubs cheering us on and us cheering him on. He really is the real deal, both on camera and off camera. If you get a chance to follow him on Twitter, you'll be encouraged and inspired. So we've been looking at 2 areas so far. How do we speak up for asylum seekers? How do we step up for those that are persecuted because of their religion and belief? And now we move into our 3rd area. How do we open up our homes and our hearts towards asylum seekers? So it's a delight to have Lauren Scott, Executive Director of Refugees at Home, one of the 130 NACOM projects offering hospitality around the country. Lauren, thanks for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about how the kind of hosting situation actually is working at the moment? What's the need right now when it comes to people who are able to host asylum seekers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I speak for all of the hosting schemes that are part of NACOM that said that the last year has been incredibly challenging. Whether that's the smaller schemes or the larger ones, we've all faced the same hurdles. And that really has come down to, as we're all familiar with, working from home, teaching children at home, those spare rooms just aren't as available anymore. And so we need a really big host recruitment drive to be able to provide those safe spaces for our guests. In terms of the demand that we think we're about to see from guests, we've been really fortunate that over the past year during the pandemic, there was emergency accommodation provisions made by the government. So that might be the hotels you might have read and heard about. That was to get people off the streets and respond to the public health crisis. We think that in line with the roadmap, that accommodation is going to come to an end quite soon. So as lockdown, as we ease out of lockdown, that accommodation will probably end, and we're likely to see thousands of people evicted. At the same time, we also have a bit of a legal aid crisis. So people who are looking to claim asylum, struggling to access that legal support that they need, and that inevitably creates delays. So we're probably going to see a bit of a backlog, and therefore people being evicted, all trying to access the same spaces, the same jobs, that kind of thing. So in terms of demand for hosting, it's only going to go up. We don't have the exact time frames, but we know that we need more hosts now more than ever.
And we're hearing that story right across the UK from all of the hosting agencies that are part of the NACOM network. But what does it mean to actually host? What do people need to be prepared for? What are the kind of requirements for a host to be useful to an organisation like you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw a comment earlier about hosting's not for everyone, and absolutely, it's not. I would say that you have to give it real proper consideration. But at the same time, hosting schemes like Refugees at Home and the others, we have tools in place to make it as easy as possible for you, whether that's our welcome packs. We have home visitors who volunteer for us and who come and visit you and help you throughout your placement. But we also recognise that there are some people that unfortunately can't be hosted for different reasons. That's not what we offer. You know, you're welcoming a stranger into your home, and that's enough. What we do hear from our hosts, because we encourage hosts and guests to socialise, and that's usually over food. Food is the big topic of conversation in our line of work. But sharing food, sharing cultures, the amounts of stories we hear of people's lives, our hosts' lives, who've been changed by welcoming a guest. And we always talk about how important it is for a guest to have somewhere safe and to integrate, and of course it is. But our host lives can be transformed by this as well. Can be really enriching.
It's very good. We are going to launch our kind of main hosting drive in the autumn. We wanted to give people a chance to really just have that seed of a thought planted in their minds. It's not a quick decision to open your home in this way. But some of the things that people might practically need, I guess you need a spare room that a asylum seeker needs to have privacy, a door that they can close, maybe access for somewhere to be able to cook for themselves so that they're not dependent on you as a host to cook for them. Are there other requirements that people might need to think about?
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of hosting is you tell us what you can offer and we will find a way to make it work. So absolutely, the demand is for hosts with a spare room and who can offer that relatively longer term. But that's not to say that emergency hosts aren't useful as well. And that might be a sofa bed, you know, for 1 or 2 nights to get somebody off the streets. Other things that you do need to think about though, if you rent your accommodation, you're certainly going to need to speak to your landlord and get those kinds of permissions. If you own your home, you want to consider the implications on insurance and council tax. And there's ways around that. And like I say, we have the tools, and I know other hosting schemes have the tools to help you with that. You're also going to need to speak and make sure that everybody in the household's on board, because quite often we will get someone who signs up, really wants to do it, but perhaps, you know, your partner isn't quite so sure, or maybe you have children in the home and they're a little unsure as well. We have a lot of hosts, single women hosts and hosts with young children who are always happy to talk with new hosts and share their experiences. And what I would just say is that any anxieties that you might have, can guarantee that they're normal anxieties and ones that we've come across before. We've made about coming up to 2,500 placements. We've got a rigorous triage process. You know, safeguarding is incredibly important to us. And out of that 2,500 placements, very few, you know, causes for concern. So like I say, I don't think that the challenges or the anxieties people are thinking of are things we haven't come across before or know how to adapt to.
It's brilliant. People are going to have a chance to ask you some questions in a moment when we have a panel on this subject. But I'm just going to bring in Rachel now, who's been a host herself, but has also looked after unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. Rachel, just tell us what prompted your family to get involved in this kind of hospitality.
We saw the news, we saw what was happening in the Mediterranean. I actually went over there, helped a little bit with the mums and the children coming off those boats. And yeah, we saw the need. We saw those were people just like us, but who'd been through some catastrophic circumstances. And so, yeah, we've been fortunate enough over the past 5 years to have 15 young refugees live with us, 3 with us at the moment. Yeah.
I heard you speak very eloquently on the Sunday program yesterday. And one thing that really touched me was you were thinking about your own children if they were in a similar circumstance. Can you just share that with us?
Absolutely. Actually, it's something we usually explain when the boys join us, because they wonder why we're doing this. And I always say the first thing, usually on the evening they arrive, I say, you know, the reason we do this is because if one of our sons had been horribly badly treated, has had to flee from danger, and had then ended up in a country where he didn't know the language and he had no friends and no money, I sort of think, what is the one thing I would want for him? Well, the one thing I would want would be for somebody kind to open their home and make him welcome and help him feel safe. And so actually it just feels like a privilege to be able to do that, not only for the young people, but actually thinking of their families, their mums and dads back home, the ones who are alive still. Yeah.
I've had the privilege to visit you in your home and to meet some of those that you've hosted. They are incredible young people, very lovely. They break all the stereotypes that are out there in terms of particularly young men. I've seen a lot of the criticism that, it's always young men that are coming to the UK. What about vulnerable people like women or the elderly? What would you say to those that say young men aren't vulnerable and therefore we shouldn't be offering hospitality?
Oh my goodness, I just wish they could hear the stories. The stories we've heard over the past 5 years. I remember one of our boys, he said to me, he was showing me the bullet wound in his leg, which he sustained, I think, when he was 14. And he said, oh, well, I was lucky, Rachel, because it just grazed. I saw people killed. And yeah, I just wish people could meet them and hear the stories when they say those things, because these young boys, of course, they're as vulnerable as any of us would be in a similar situation. Yeah.
On the Sunday programme, we didn't have a chance to reply very much, but there was a professor that was brought on who was very dismissive of hosting, saying it's just naive, you're opening your family up to too much danger, we shouldn't be doing this, we shouldn't be encouraging people to come here. Lauren or Rachel, what would you say in response to that? Those that are doing this are just naive do-gooders.
Okay, well, I would say, yeah, I don't agree. I mean, I'd say there's actually plenty of laughter in our home, but there's plenty of tears as well. This is genuine pain that these people are coming from. And no, we're not naive. Our youngest children were just 8 and 9 when we welcomed the first couple of refugees in. And I was talking to our kids recently and saying, how is it feeling for you now? This is your childhood. And they said, well, it makes it more interesting and exciting. And we have a lot more fun. And it's enriched their lives. Their understanding of the world and its problems, their empathy has grown massively. So yeah, it's not every day isn't easy, but then it isn't anyway. And actually, the good days are just wonderful, and it feels like a privilege to do it.
Thank you, Rachel. Lauren, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how I can add to that, really. Rachel's put it so well. I mean, certainly from our perspective as a charity, we operate from a place of humanity. We quite often get asked about people claiming asylum, and our response is always, we are not here to judge the merits of somebody's claim. That's between the solicitors and the Home Office. We're here to provide a safe space until they figure out what the next step is.
It's really helpful. Let's bring in one more person. We had David Burrows on earlier. David, who is the special advisor to Fiona Bruce, who is the Prime Minister's envoy on freedom of religion and belief. That must be a huge business card, David, because I think I only just managed to remember all the components of it. But David, this is something that's personal to you as well. Tell us a little bit about your hosting experience.
Well, it's nothing compared to Rachel. In awe of her and others. So it's just a very humble experience. But I suppose it just gives a bit of an impression on the need. So mine's just in terms of short-term support for an individual who can't go back to his home place in Iran. It's not safe for him. It wouldn't be safe for his family. And we've helped out in the short term, and we'll be helping out a bit in the summer. And it does happen in the journey. He then needed to confirm it was necessary to go into hostel hotel accommodation, and people may think, well, that's fine. He's in a nice shelter, and we saw the headlines in the tabloids trying to make a thing of these grand hotels that they're in. And he was incredibly isolated during this period of time. In fact, we couldn't speak to him. We wanted to find out what happened. He'd tried to take his life. And this is someone who, when he was with us and with a network of others, church and others, was wonderfully engaging, a beautiful, lovely man with so much to offer. But vulnerability is hidden there, full of trauma and full of issues that then came out in his isolation in this hotel. And he also was the only one in the hotel who could speak English, and he did the interpreting for a friend who had health problems, and went to a hospital in Manchester, and he had to do all the interpreting. And the trauma then came back because then, sadly, this friend who couldn't articulate his heart problems, coming back in a taxi at the hotel, died, dead, as he was sitting there with his friend. And these are people. This is what's happened. All the health issues, all the trauma. And now, just to take it further, why he's going to come and stay with us. He's then gone to a lovely house in residential area in the north. I won't say exactly where, but beautiful house. It looks beautiful in a beautiful neighbourhood. And because he again speaks English, he then said hello to the neighbours, and they said, "Sorry, you're not welcome here. You're not welcome here. We want a family here. We don't want you and a bunch of other asylum seekers." Well, in fact, they said no. They said, "We just don't want you. We just want a family." Which was, and he realized they didn't want him. And he's then in that situation. So on the face of it, people may think, well, they've got a shelter, they've got a house, they've got a hotel. But unless they've got the love and care that one expects in our own home with our own children, and Rachel's shown that with her extended family, unless one has that home, then these people, their vulnerabilities come out, and they need that long-term health and support, because there's the ups and downs for many months. And so it's just to make the point really that we want the offers of homes, we want the offer of support, and to help them through the ups and downs of life, and people who are in there for the long term, and also those who are probably listening who may not themselves just be able to offer the home, but who've got the network of support, who are willing to do not that, those neighbours in the north there who just said you're not welcome here, who are willing to join in with the hosts to support them, and that's so important. So yes, so that's my small little token. But we can all play our part. We are, said we are all in this together, and we must do that to support the hosts and to be hosts ourselves.
Thank you so much. Let me just a quick fire round to each of you. Just a brief answer would be helpful as we're coming to land. Lauren, let's start with you. If someone was 50-50 on this call about whether to step forward as a host, what would you say to encourage them to take that next step?
I'd say, again, the totally natural place to be. The best thing to do is to get in touch with, say, a hosting scheme. Ask as many questions as you need to ask. Every hosting scheme that's part of the NACOM network is well prepared for people who are feeling a bit anxious, a bit unsure. And we're here to support you. That is the role of hosting schemes. As much as it is about supporting guests and keeping them safe, it's about looking after our hosts.
Thank you, Lauren. And Rachel, I'm sure you've got lots you could say here, but how would you say being a host has impacted your faith in your life?
In a very positive way. Yeah, it's made me think about things that are going on around the world. I feel quite ashamed of my ignorance before. And it's brought us a lot of fun, and it's brought us those wonderful moments when someone passes their GCE or passes their driving test or gets their first job. It just happened last week. One of our lads living with us, he started work, and he feels so great when he gets in. And lots of good points.
Thank you, Rachel. And David, we heard from Lord Dubbs, a Labour peer. You're connected, really involved with the Conservative Party. What advice do you have for us of transcending the party politics on this issue? How do we make sure that particularly the church is able to do government and not just party politics? Do you have wisdom for us?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is about good government. It's about caring for the vulnerable and those who need our help. And when I was in Parliament working with Lord Dubbs and knowing that a lot of MPs cross-party who are concerned, not least, say, for example, the issue of persecution and freedom of religion or belief, is one of the largest all-party parliamentary groups of people who believe all things and none in terms of faith. And so that's and so, yeah, so definitely get involved with this issue and realise that this transcends the usual knockabout around immigration issues and policy. This is about human dignity, and any MP should be concerned about this, not least Conservative MPs who've signed their manifesto pledge to fulfil the requirements to care for the persecuted.
That's really helpful. So we're coming to a close, and I just want to thank Lauren and Rachel and David and Archbishop Angelos, Rahima, Pastor Shola, So many of our guests tonight just really touched us with their personal experiences and their passion. So thank you all for joining us. So what's next? What would we ask of you as you think about your next step with the Hospitality Pledge? Well, tonight we're just launching the idea in front of you that there's a threefold response that's really for right now. As this new plan for immigration goes through the kind of legislative process, there's a kairos moment, an opportunity for us to do something powerful and important in engaging with it. And as you've heard, we've got those three components. We're talking about speaking up for asylum seekers, that we might make sure that this system that's coming forward is as humane and just and compassionate as possible, working constructively with the government. Second area, we want to step up for people that are persecuted because of their religion and belief. And as Christians, we have particular empathy and experience and knowledge about how to help government, help people of faith. So we think there's something very specific to be done there. And the third area is opening up. Open up your home and your hearts to asylum seekers. You've heard from people who host and people that run the hosting services that they are ready and willing. And we're about to face this tidal wave of need, as all those who are currently in accommodation may well face being evicted as the lockdown comes to a close. So we heard from the NACOM network that during 2019 to 2020, they were able to help over 3,400 people have somewhere safe to live, but they had to turn away 1,800 people because they just did not have enough bed space. My vision is, wouldn't it be amazing if through the church and families and individuals stepping up, joining one of these projects, we could make sure that no one gets turned away and everyone gets the safe accommodation they need. That's the vision behind Welcome Pledge. Speak up, step up, open up. And we'd love for you to be part of this journey. We don't want this just to be an emotional response, having heard some really tough things today, challenging things, emotional things today. And so we'll be in touch with you through the email address that you gave us when you signed up for the Eventbrite tonight. We'll be in touch with you to find out how you would like to be involved. We're planning, we're building a website that will be ready in the autumn, so that wherever you are in the country, you'll be able to connect in and find out which your local hosting service is and how you can be involved. We're already working in-house with the Home Office to try and consult with them, help them find solutions to problems that they're facing. And so we'll be letting you know things that you can be praying or contributing to that. There's some really fine detail work going on. We've got an excellent human rights lawyer that's working with us. So we're asking all of you to play your part. So watch this space, watch your email. You're going to get an email from me tomorrow morning, which will ask you to take your next step as we build towards the full launch of the Hospitality Pledge this September. But we wanted you in at the beginning because there's some important stuff that you can be doing right now. So thank you everybody for joining us. It's been a pleasure to spend time with you. If you've missed some of tonight, don't worry. We're going to make this available on YouTube so you can kind of rewind and watch it like on iPlayer. I'll share the link with you on the email I'll send you tomorrow, and then share it far and wide. Let's get the church active. Let's get them clued up so they know how they can be involved. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Join us again very soon. Thanks for joining the Hospitality Pledge. Thanks.